Sorry, sorry.
Welcome to the second episode of me agreeing and disagreeing with Stephen Barrett, because not only are we two right.
We're damn right. So, Annunciata, I'm just sort of dumping the because we neither you or I really know what we're doing, and we're just reacting to the stories as they come. And I'm afraid something really, really awful has happened. In Spain, there is a young woman called Noelia Castillo Ramos, and she has been killed by the state. She was the victim of gang rape by illegal immigrants, and that was caused by the state because the state took was in loco parentis of her as a young person, and they put her in shared accommodation with illegal migrants who gang raped her. She couldn't really deal with that, so she threw herself off a five-story building, and from her point of view, unfortunately survived. And so she elected euthanasia. And there are some stories about her organs. I don't know how truthful those are. One has to take the internet with a pinch of salt. But it looks as though she was simply ground down to a state by her country's incompetence that she asked to be killed. She was 25. Um, I want her pictures to be everywhere. I mean, you and I we're not old, but we're of a certain age now, and young people just they don't realize how lucky they are. But that girl should not have been killed. And I think we just have to take a moment for Noelia Ramos. And I'm dumping this on you because I expect you've
Yeah,
missed this, and I expect
I,
a lot of
I
people will have missed this.
I just got back from a choir uh, thing that my daughter was in, so I haven't seen the very latest news, but I had spotted that she was due to kill herself today. And I mean, it is just completely heartbreaking and such a betrayal of the position of trust and responsibility the state has over its citizens' lives. And she was completely paralyzed. You can see why she was mentally tormented after the gang rape, why she wanted to jump off a building, and you can see after that why she didn't want to live as she was. But it is such failure amongst, no doubt, I don't know the Spanish system anything like I would here, but numerous different parts of the state that have completely and utterly failed that young lady. And to make it worse, they've just given amnesty to hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants, and they don't even know who they are.
See, I think this is where we get to, and I don't mean to be offensive to non-religious people, but I think this is where we get to without religious morality, because effectively the state just turns you into a meat unit. That's all you become in the eyes of the state. And the fact that it fails you, the state seems to feel no embarrassment for continually failing people. I mean, look, they were in control of this young woman when she was underage. They should it was their duty to protect her. They failed to protect her. It was their duty to look after her mental health once it had happened. They failed in their duty to her mental health. Once she'd thrown herself
Yeah.
off a building, it's their duty to move heaven and earth to make sure that she has a good quality of life. They have clearly failed in all of this. I mean, and it just didn't because I don't. You and I are both parents, and I just can't deal with this at all. I just look at her and I see that she's somebody's child. I know that her father was trying to carry out immediate emergency legal work today. So I mean, my heart is with him and prayers. But I mean, she again because we both have the comfort of religion, and I think that although again we disagree on quite the flavour of that religion, because just to
Yeah.
explain to viewers, and Annunciata is Catholic, and I'm Church of England. But that is a great comfort to me because I do feel that God is now looking after Noelia, who the state completely let down. And everybody who says to me, give up God and believe in the state, I'm like, no, no, God doesn't let you down. The state lets you down. And that's
Yeah.
what has happened to this poor young woman whose life has just been a catalogue of state failure. And Spain has already slipped into Marxism, and no doubt will slip further. But it's only us just on a slightly advanced track. That's all. We're heading here. They want to. We've got. Have we got the illegal immigrants? Yes. Are the illegal immigrants committing outrageous offences? Yes. Are our young women and girls not safe? Indeed, they are not safe, as the Pakistani rape gang show. Is something like this going to happen here? Very likely.
The
Is the state?
states,
Yeah. Sorry.
the state's failings on our own rape gangs, I just absolutely highlight this problem that girls were not believed. That is going to make your mental state so much worse. That if people are telling you you're making it up, that it's not bad enough that the police should investigate, that you don't really have a problem, when in fact you have been treated absolutely appallingly, abused, raped, stigmatized. And it will massively compound the mental problems you would have from those horrible events anyway. And then, of course, we're bringing in the assisted dying law, and it has said it will include all sorts of mental health disorders. And who's to say that that lady Noelia wouldn't have qualified under our rules here? Things like anorexia do. I'm I'm pretty sure a paraplegic could claim they didn't have very long to live or get a doctor to agree they didn't. And her mental state would put her in such a position she didn't want to.
Well,
It's
what the bill's
state
drafters would
sponsored
say.
killing.
Yeah, but it is state killing. What the bill's sponsors would say, and I want to go into this in a bit of detail, legal detail, just so that people understand quite the cynicism in the bill. What they would say is that they put protections in place so that mental health cannot be used as a reason to access assisted suicide. But clearly, what Noelia would have done in our system under our bill is say, I want assisted suicide because I'm a paraplegic. And then the fact that she's depressed and it's her depression that's making her is true, but it is ignored. And oh
Mm,
look, you can now access assisted dying. So all of this nonsense they talk and talk that we put in protections against to protect the mentally ill. It's like no, you haven't. As long as they can tag it onto something else. And so an anorexic, again, I think anorexia is a very good point to point out, because an anorexic, a victim of anorexia will have some physical condition, very likely to have some physical condition, because that's what anorexia does to you. And
yeah,
although it's really the prime motivation is the mental state, they'll be able to
yeah,
tag it onto some physical disability and thereby end their lives. And this is just, it's utilitarianism for those who and if anybody's not heard that word, I know it sounds scary, but it just this idea that human beings are only meat units. And it really is it really is religious people of all religions, actually, who stand in opposition to utilitarianism, because every religion believes
yeah.
that there is some sort of immutable part of you. So it's crass to call it, to say they all believe in a soul, but they all believe in some immutable part of humanity that isn't connected to our bodies. But the
A
utilitarians,
spirit.
yeah, but the utilitarians just believe that we are bodies, we are meat units, and that therefore they can price us and value us. This is where slavery comes from. This is where every human ill comes from, is the idea that humans are just commodities.
A commodity. That's something we agree on. Humans are not commodities. I don't personally think that animals are just commodities. We've both got dogs, and those creatures have their own souls going on. But reducing humanity to sort of transactional meaninglessness, it just devalues the entire value of any life. And at that point, you do kill babies up to full term. You do euthanize people when they're no longer useful.
Yeah.
And one of the protections that didn't get through on that bill was protecting people who are coerced because of financial concerns, who are coerced because of lack of medical care. This is the state cutting its costs at the price of human life.
Yeah, the Online Safety Act, which is currently causing all sorts of trouble and is just authoritarian madness, and is digital ID already, so it really needs to go. But that is brought in on the
Yeah.
argument that there was a website in America that was encouraging young people to commit suicide, and we need to stop our young people having access to that website. Now, what the Americans actually did was cut off British access to that website, which sounds to me a pretty sensible way of dealing with issues if we have a particular issue with the website. But
Yeah.
we have brought in a draconian act of parliament, which is huge and has crushing powers to really control our lives, on the premise that we mustn't let young people or anybody access a website encouraging suicide, yet they're going to bring in a law where doctors are going to say, "Oh, sorry, love, have you thought about killing yourself?" And they are, and I don't
Indeed.
care how cheap that
Yeah.
sounds to people. And of course, the most emotional people who want assisted suicide, they always come from the good ones, not the psychopaths, not the utilitarians, the good people who believe in this, because there are
Yeah,
good
yeah.
people who believe in this. They come from a
Oh,
very loving position of not wanting suffering, and I understand
yeah.
that. But the simple fact is, we cannot devise a system that can't be abused. We can't devise a system where, a man who's been a husband to a woman for 15 years, who frankly has demeaned her every day, who has eroded her self-respect and self-confidence. She might have resorted to overeating as a result and become fat, and then that her largeness might cause her some physical ailment. And hey presto, he convinces her, actually, honey,
Yeah.
what you want to do is kill yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
How do you stop
Um,
it? You can't stop it.
you can't stop that. And one of my really big issues with it as well is, and it's similar to jury trials, which I know you hugely support maintaining, as do I, but it's having the state being kind of both judge and jury in both cases, so that state employees, i.e., doctors, get to decide whether you're killed or not. It's part of their job to keep you alive, but they can also decide that you can die. And with juries going, it will be state employees, judges, deciding for the state. And this doesn't seem just. It doesn't seem open, transparent, or having any ability to be challenged by us, the small people. It is the state taking control over more and more of our lives. And life and death is one they should not have control over.
Yes, I mean I hate it when we fiercely agree, but I am of that opinion. That causes me to think that the death penalty is not something we should ever bring back either. Not because I
Agreed.
don't. There are people I would gladly have suffer the death penalty, and we don't need to name them. Everybody will know who they are, but then the people, particularly who harm children,
Yeah.
that's if I could get a functioning death penalty. But the simple fact is, I don't think it can function, and it's exactly the same as assisted suicide for me. We must stop fiercely agreeing. But let's move on to a story of somewhat happier note, or a lighter note, which is where the Prime Minister is asking people to believe him, which is absolutely hilarious. So I don't know how much you know about this. Have you seen Carl Turner? He's a Labour MP, God bless him. He's just like, I don't. And he swears, he uses the demotic Annunciata. But
Yes,
he does. I
good
mean,
old
I use it from
Anglo-Saxon.
time to time.
Um, it, I can't believe there's anyone in this country who believes Keir Starmer at this point. The farce around McSweeney's phone is just stretching credibility to a comic level. That,
Absurd. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Mandelson gets fired. A week later, McSweeney loses a highly sensitive phone. Loses stolen. Stolen by a man
Yeah,
in a balaclava.
defo
The
stolen, and then
balaclava is
defo.
very important.
Yeah, very scary man.
The
Had something like 8
police,
legs or something. I can't remember. Scary man. 20 foot tall. Blue, piercing blue eyes. Terrifying man. Absolutely terrifying. He said, "I am the phone stealer," and he took it, officer. Yeah, definitely happened. Definitely.
managed to mistake Belgrave Road in Belgravia, Pimlico's SW1, for Belgrave Street in E1. Well, this strikes me as highly unlikely. I'm pretty sure one of the jobs of the Metropolitan Police is to know the streets in their city. And given the fact there isn't a Belgrave Road in in E1, in SE1, I think they mistook it for, whichever. It doesn't exist. That's quite a double mistake to mistake street for road and SW1 for SE1. Um, And so they just closed the investigation. They didn't think
Well, I'm going to defend that. I'm going to be rare on this, and I don't normally do this.
to secure with Downing's. Why would Downing Street not going straight to the security services? You've lost the Prime Minister's phone number and his communications because clearly McSweeney was communicating with Starmer. This is a serious threat to national security. Most of those stolen phones that have been tracked end up in China, of all places. That's not where you want all the sensitive information ending up. Now they all, obviously, whoever did steal it, if it was stolen, knows they've got a very valuable phone, and they quite often have them for a number of months. They might well still be holding on to it. And it wasn't backed up. Because
Yeah, of course not. Why would you back up a phone? I'm just the chief advisor to the Prime Minister. Nothing I say matters. I'm just bound by law to keep accurate records. I don't have to do that. I'm just bound by policy to screen grab my WhatsApps and send them to civil servants. But obviously that didn't apply to me. It's just all complete nonsense. I'm going to do something rare, Annunciata, which is defend the Metropolitan Police. Because I've been through that transcript, and I think he was deliberately misleading them. So he says Belgrave Street. He says that. And then they say Belgrave Street. And then he says, yeah, and he's gone up a few blocks. He literally used the word blocks in Annunciata. It really irritates me. The left is just
American.
Yeah, exactly. They're culturally American. He said a couple of blocks that way and towards a green area. And she's obviously looking on the map. And she goes, oh, Stepney Park then. And he goes, yes.
I hadn't seen
it is not. I don't blame that. So, and I'm just assuming that the operator is a woman. I don't know why I'm doing that, but anyway, the operator of the 999 call, I don't blame them at all. I think he deliberately misled them because he didn't at any point say, actually, it's Belgrave Road or Stepney Park. No, we're nowhere near Stepney Park because non-Londoners won't know how far away these things are. But effectively, again, just for listeners and viewers, London is in fact two cities that eventually grew to bump into each other. Okay, two cities that were close but were far apart.
Yeah.
All of those, the areas that he misled the police into are all in the city, the old city of London, where he was actually in the part of the old city of Westminster and quite deep into the old city of Westminster. And so the distance between them is astronomical. It's basically the entirety of the EastEnders opening credits, assuming there is still EastEnders and assuming it still has opening credits, which I don't know.
There is, and it does. But I have stopped watching it. I absolutely loved it till about 2020, and it jumped too many sharks. Anyway, I think that this whole McSweeney thing reads like an EastEnders plot. It is completely unbelievable, and it reeks of cover-up.
Well, I'm afraid
they always say, ever since Watergate, they've said it's the cover-up that gets you in the end, and I think that will probably end up being the case.
Well, I'm afraid to correct you, Annunciata, but actually, if you look at the detail, I think you will discover that it is far-fetched to imagine that the phone was not stolen. And so there we are. That's conclusive from the bollard's own mouth. The way that they treat us, though.
But far-fetched does not mean it's not true.
No.
Far-fetched means it's unlikely.
Just means
so he
it's
isn't
a bloody
actually
stupid
even
thing to
saying
do.
It's not true.
No, he's an absolutely shocking man, an absolutely shocking disgrace of a man. And you always have to trace the steps with this. You know, at the moment we're at the stage where he ought to resign because they're pretending that a phone that obviously wasn't stolen was stolen. Okay. But let's go back from that. He ought to have resigned because Morgan McSweeney was dealing with the appointment of the ambassadors to Washington in a completely unprofessional way via WhatsApp with no records. He ought to resign for that. Okay, take a step back. He ought to resign for the fact that he misled the House because he said to the House of Commons that Peter Mandelson lied to him, yet Peter Mandelson was only talking to Morgan McSweeney. He wasn't talking to the Prime Minister. So he ought to resign to that. Okay, let's step back a bit. the Prime Minister ought to resign because he appointed Peter Mandelson without proper vetting and against obvious advice. Good. He ought to resign. And then step back one step further.
Yep.
He ought to resign because everybody knew Peter Mandelson was the best friend of Jeffrey Epstein. Everybody knew. It was in the press. It was
Yes.
in the
It had
Telegraph.
been on the front pages.
And he
Yeah.
was shown that. So this is
It's
like
unbelievable.
we're now at the many layers of why the Prime Minister needs to resign. It's just at the core is a reason the Prime Minister should resign, but every day it just gets worse. It's like, oh, another reason,
Worse.
another
Oh,
reason.
there's another reason.
I just don't understand how
I
you
would
can
love to
wrap
hear
it.
from anyone watching this, if you do trust Keir Starmer, or you believe that the mobile phone was genuinely stolen by a man in a balaclava who cycled along on a bike and snatched it in the heart of Westminster. If you believe either of those things, do let us know how, because I can't even imagine how I could believe him. None of it passes the faintest whiff test. It stinks to high heaven.
No, well, what I'd like to do now might become a recurring feature, but I'd just like to highlight which cabinet ministers ought to resign. So we've obviously highlighted the Prime Minister because he
Oh,
needs to
okay.
resign. But I think the fact that he needs
Yeah.
to resign and doesn't often detracts from the fact that other people need to resign. So Wes Streeting, who is the Health Secretary,
Yep.
needs to resign or be sacked for trying to start a study to see if poisonous drugs that harm children harm children.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and being best mates with Mandelson.
And being best mates with Mandelson,
He's
and
yeah.
he's
Got
involved in PhoneGate.
double whammy.
He's also involved in PhoneGate because he lied. He went on the media and said, "I have." It's very likely that they have automatically delete of the WhatsApp. You know that function WhatsApp has. I use that, and then immediately
Yeah.
everybody was like, "Well,
Disappearing messages.
you don't have that's thank you.
You're not meant
You
to.
don't have disappearing messages because you published your messages from 2 years ago to Peter Mandelson. So you're lying." And then one of his colleagues, because they're all knives out for each other at this point. It's all stabbing stab in the Labour cabinet. But one of his colleagues briefed a journalist saying, "I've been in communication with him, on a daily basis. He doesn't have disappearing messages on." So he needs to resign for that. But I also think an honourable mention goes to the Defence Secretary, who...
Oh, that was who I was about to mention, John Healey. His interview with Nick Ferrari this morning. We've seen prime ministers, we've seen cabinet ministers have car crash interviews. We've seen shadow ministers have car crash interviews. This was a titanic maritime collision of the greatest order. He was, asked a very simple question. How many frigates have we got?
Yeah.
And he just, 17? I think it's 17.
12
we've got 17. And we don't have 17 anyway. We have
no, we don't. Of course we don't. We're not a
12
serious
or 13. 12 or 13, depending what state of uselessness you count them as still operational. But he's the Defence Secretary. It wasn't a gotcha question. It wasn't is it 9,326 or 9,327? It was only just into double digits. They're big things, frigates.
Yeah.
You really should know.
Well, and we don't have many
there's a war
of them.
going on.
And the fact
terrifying.
that we are at war, yeah, exactly. We are at war. We are being attacked, and our Defence Secretary is unaware of what assets we have. That is insane. That is the level of sheer insanity that needs to happen. So I think honourable mention to the Defence Secretary. You remember his name? I keep forgetting his name. What is it? He's an odd-looking
John Healey.
John Healey.
Yeah.
And I think an honourable mention to Steve Reed, who is the pretending to do business secretary. Is that what he does? Who again just blatantly lied on. I think on Sunday. I forget which day they lie on. When he went on the telly to say that the phone was stolen a year before Mandelson had to resign. It's like that's
yeah.
Okay, that's another lie.
Absolutely, and we can't forget that he was the Rural Affairs Secretary of State, DEFRA, when the farm tax came in, that obviously had to have a backtrack. But Lord Ali did give him wellies so that he could do the job. Very important to have designer wellies.
Oh, but you see, because you and I are both rural, and you know that. I mean, designer wellies are great in Chelsea, love, but they
Yeah,
go down like a cup of cold sick with real farmers.
they really do. Wellies are practical. They are not a status symbol, unless, of course, you're Steve Reed and Lord Ali. Um, we can't not mention, I mean, most of the cabinet, but Rachel Reeves.
Oh, gosh, she's awful. She's destroyed the economy. I mean, we shouldn't laugh because actually, it's real lives that are suffering. Like real lives are going. People are losing jobs as we speak. Companies are closing. We're losing Denby Pottery. You know,
Yeah.
we're losing everything because they are so bad at the economy.
And then she tries to blame petrol stations for price gouging when 55% of the petrol pump price goes to the Treasury. The Treasury is having a bigger windfall from the increase in prices than the companies that are providing the petrol and diesel. Complete hypocrisy, and I think makes life quite difficult and probably quite threatening if you do work in a petrol station and people are saying this is you taking advantage. I think that's incredibly unfair kick down of something that really is her fault.
Yeah,
And then
because
of
let's
course
face it, Annunciata, working in a petrol station is probably tough. And it was the Association of Pump Attendants, I think, who said that we're not going to. We were invited to a meeting. We're not going because she's I want to. She's attacked us. She's left us
yeah.
vulnerable.
Um, and she's
But
doubled down on
Annunciata,
it
I have to
since.
say, and I think you're missing this. She is a woman, so it's just
Oh
I don't know.
yes.
Where's your hatred coming from? I just don't know.
Yeah,
Why?
I just hate all women. Or perhaps I just hate all completely incompetent, over promoted women who probably weren't very good at customer services, but are definitely no good at being the Chancellor.
She is an absolute disgrace.
Maggie Thatcher was undoubtedly a woman and was a fantastic leader. You could love her policies or you could hate them, but by God, was she a leader? Labour doesn't have a single one of those.
No, although I still hold a candle for Angela Rayner, and I know that this is where we do really fall out. But I still have some hope for her. And at least she
I
doesn't have
think
to resign because she already did. Yay!
she did, and as far as I know, she still hasn't cleared her tax bill despite being paid for on expenses for huge
But I
tax
think
advice.
no. So again, I think what's going on with the tax thing is that they are officially investigating, and she can't pay the bill until they finish the investigation and tell her what the bill is.
But
And I think there's shenanigans going on to delay the investigation. They are knifey, all of them.
they are very knifey. But why was her tax advice after she was caught out paid for by the Labour Party? She was buying a house. This was nothing to do with her work. It wasn't even a house in her constituency. It wasn't a house for her to live in London. It was a flat in Brighton. It was an investment property. That should have no connection to her party, and it should not be them paying for it.
Well, I can see that. I can see that point.
And has she declared it as a taxable benefit?
I don't.
Or is
I
she going to
don't know.
get
You
in
leave
yet
my
more?
Angela alone. But on finishing up this little snippet of who needs to resign, we honourable mention I think also goes to Tulip Siddiq, who needs to go to Bangladesh and face justice because she was put on trial, and sure, do you know what their main complaint is, Annunciata? The main complaint is that it's not a fair trial because she didn't have a jury.
Yeah, no, I did see that. The irony, it's absolutely amazing. They just don't get it. Juries are good enough for them, but not good enough for the rest of us. Us little people don't deserve the protection of being tried by our peers, but those frightfully important politicians do. It's rank hypocrisy. But I'm not going to let this section end without mentioning Ed Miliband
Oh,
because I
Mad
think
Ed. Poor Mad Ed. Pity Mad Ed. Mad Ed's a cold.
Red Ed is absolutely destroying this country. Not opening up the gas and oil fields in the North Sea, it's going to cost us very dearly. Across the board, we've already had Marks and Spencer come out and say the taxes on fuel and energy are putting up their prices in the shops. These are policy decisions, they are political decisions, and the government could undo them. They could unlock the shale, they could unlock the North Sea, and we could have a much greater degree, not 100%, but a greater degree of energy security. Instead of that, he is going down a route of plastering over our farmland. I was at a dinner here in Lincolnshire last Friday, where a woman had just been, a local farmer had been asked to give evidence about a solar farm that's going in on grade one agricultural land. There is barely any grade one agricultural land in this country. Most of it is, as it happens, in this area, which is why it produces more food than anywhere else in the country. We're the vegetable supplier for the nation, and covering it in solar panels is an absolutely obscene risk, both to our energy security and our food security.
It is. It's absolutely obscene, and just to big up because I grew up in Worcestershire and I live in Buckinghamshire, and my heart lies in the Western Lands. I'm in my heart I'm a child of Wessex, and if I get the train from where I am in Bucks to
I'm a Somerset girl, so
well, that's true. You've sold your soul to the East. But if I get the train to Oxford, you pass these things, you pass these solar farms, and it's unbelievable. They are to a countryside person who knows what the countryside looks like. They are death. That's all they are. They are because they have to have
yeah,
obviously. If you're not a rural person watching this, we have a tiny little, let's call them mites, although countryside people might use other words for them, particularly if they go after your favorite flower, who are like miniature deer called muntjac, and they do cause
yeah,
massive trouble. They're just a
yeah.
problem. They're just a problem. But the muntjac have to be kept out. So the first thing
They're
they do is
hilarious,
they
though.
fence. Well, I quite like muntjac. I have a soft spot for them, but they are a
Yeah,
they are just
they're
they are
so
obviously
ugly. You've got to like them.
but they have to fence off, so you get double deer fencing all round the solar panels. Then a robot is cutting the grass, so it's just very thin cut grass. There's no life there at all, and it's just these solar panels sitting there for the expanse of an entire field, and it's absolutely soul wrenching. It's barbaric. It is death. That's what they represent to me. They're not life. They're not
And
the countryside. They are just death.
they're not like. And Ed wants us all to believe that lovely sheep can graze underneath and this and that. Well, speak to a sheep farmer about that
Yeah, they
one, Ed.
can't.
It doesn't really work. The economies of scale and all of that doesn't work. But um, my favourite ever site was in Lincolnshire, where we've got a relatively small one, not very far away at all. And I drove past it one winter, and there was barely any snow on the ground, but every single solar panel had about 2 inches of snow on it. And I was just thinking, yeah, when you need electricity, when it's, cold, that's going to provide a lot, isn't it? Or not? But there are so many solutions we could be using that we're not. I think we should have small nuclear reactors dotted around the country. I think we should allow the local communities to benefit directly from these developments, whether it's for renewables or for more reliable forms of energy. But we should be using what we've got in this country. And as an example, solar, of a list of 200 countries in the world, we come 199th
Yeah,
for
we're like the
how
worst.
bad
The only place worse than us to put solar
Ireland,
panels is Ireland. Yeah.
Ireland. Why are we scrapping the best agricultural land in the world for the worst solar? It
Yeah.
makes no sense, and it will long-term damage the soil structure, the productivity. They're not recyclable. There are so many problems that it's going to make much worse.
Yeah, this is what communists do, and they come up with grandiose solutions that to non-existent problems that then cause more problems. I'm also fiercely pro coal and gas and oil. I have no shame in supporting them to be perfectly honest. We are an interesting, just to explain a bit of law, we're interesting in that a lot of legal systems will grant you, when you own the land, you grant what's under you gain what's under the land. We don't do that, and that's a
No,
bit
I know.
weird. It
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
bit
yeah.
weird. It's like you're allowed to build a basement, but if there's coal under your house, you don't own that coal.
No,
That is a sort of, although that is, I accept that's weird. It's our historical oddness. It does give us a sort of opportunity where what you could do is you could parcel all the land in an area that might get fracked, say, or that might have a coal mine, say. And you could say, okay, 5% of the profits from all of the stuff can be spent by the local parish council or the local community or whatever, so that people feel a serious economic benefit from the fact that they are the ones near the coal mine or near the shale gas.
absolutely.
And that just
Yeah.
strikes me as the rational thing to do. Parcel it all up, make sure everyone benefits. And Annunciata, I have a sneaking suspicion that the Norwegians aren't even bothering to tap their own oil and gas wells. They're just diagonally digging into ours and then selling us our stuff.
If we're not going to use them, I can't say you could blame them if they are.
No.
It is a resource sitting there. And even if you don't like driving petrol and diesel cars, if you don't like having a gas boiler, or we're very rural, we're not on the gas mains, so we have a heating oil boiler. But even if you want to get rid of all of that,
Tell us about that. Just
oil
explain that, because
is
actually,
something.
although you have it because you're a massive house in the middle of nowhere, a lot of, like, most of Northern Ireland is in exactly the
Local
same position.
town.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I did double check. I mean, I knew our village wasn't on the gas mains, but even our local town of 2,000 people is not on the gas mains. That it predominantly does affect rural communities
So
where gas
explain to
mains have,
people what
for
it is.
whatever reason, not been laid. So what we have to do is you can either use an LPG tank to fire up your boiler,
What's
or
LPG? Is
you
that a
can have
gas? Is that gas?
liquefied
Okay.
petroleum gas. Yeah. So that if we were producing that here from the North Sea, you can ship it straight on shore and use it. However, we're getting it from the Middle East, where it has to be turned into liquid and then back to gas again. I mean, this is ridiculous. But anyway, not if you're using it in a tank outside your house. The other option is heating oil, which is basically kerosene. And you, either way around, a big tank comes round, fills up your smaller tank as often as you need it. Heating oil has more than doubled since the Iran crisis has
Has it?
started. And that is what the government have offered. So a 1,000 litre tank, which would be you'd either have 500 or 1,000 litres, but the maths is always easier with 1,000. 1,000 litre tank would be on the larger side for a normal house. It was costing 600, give or take, to fill up. That's now £1,200-1,300.
And how quickly do you get through one?
That depends how much you have your heating on. I'm
So
afraid we
that's
do
what
get
people will
through
be
them.
doing, is it? They'll
Some
be
people might make it last a year. Most people probably have 2 a year fill
right,
ups. But
right.
that's a very big sudden increase. And you don't necessarily control when you need it filled up.
No.
Um,
And if we had our own gas supplies, this wouldn't be happening. I mean, it's absolutely infuriating that they don't seem to recognize that we have gas, we can use gas.
and we should not have been discouraging it, that um, we should have been taking advantage of our own supplies. And for electricity, as you say, coal, but also shale. And if you
Yeah.
look to America, they've got a massive protection against world crises because they can and do produce their own reliable fuels. And there are, everyone knows, there are days where the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. The sun doesn't shine all night long. Our backup storage is absolutely piddling. but the batteries aren't really there to make it immensely better. The technology just isn't there yet.
No,
So
and when you say yet, because I have a sinking suspicion that certain things can never be achieved, and one of them is the idea of battery technology, because it sort
funnily
of
enough,
defies the universe.
I was looking at fuel cell technology professionally. I was doing financial research in 1998, and they were round the corner. Well,
Yeah.
1998 is not yesterday anymore.
No, and I can't remember it because I'm just a spring chicken. But but I want us to be able to deal with the media, to fight the media cycle, because there is this thing where stories seem to only last 24 hours. I think it all comes from Alistair Campbell, who I don't like or respect at all.
No, I
Um,
think can I just say quickly on Alistair Campbell that I think he has done such long-term damage to the trust anyone in this country has in politicians and in experts. Saddam Hussein could bomb us in, was it 12 minutes? I have now forgotten how
45
40,
minutes.
of course it was 45 minutes. Um, has undermined trust, I think, permanently and now generationally, that we cannot trust what comes out of the government. And we've seen that on various events in the Iran crisis, people just going, well, that didn't happen. And I don't know if it did happen or it didn't happen, but I think it all does go back to Alistair Campbell misleading, entirely lying about the 45-minute threat.
Well, fundamentally, the left have got themselves into this position where they don't care about truth anymore. They don't. They literally don't value it. They think it's clever that everything is subjectivity. This is postmodernism. It's Foucaultism. They think that everything is perfectly subjective. It's just a matter of perception. It's not true. It's never been true. And if you think everything's about perception, okay, then you're just perceiving the wall. So just run at it, change your perception, and I'm sure you'll get through. But you know, well, I said this to David Starkey, and he was teaching me, because I knoweth nothing compared to the great Dr. David. But he was just like, when Dr. Johnson had to deal with the same issue, he just kicked a stone apparently, and he was just like, "Yep, not everything is that subjective, is it? That stone." And we do need to remind them that there is such a thing as objective truth. I think the lack of truth is really undermining politics. I really hate to see it, because actually, your brother represented at least the attempt to restore truth in politics. That's what he was doing. And a lot of people will say about him, I don't support him because obviously he's a Tory and everybody supports reform. But I don't support him, but I respect him. And that is what we need to get back. We need to get back the idea of respectable politicians. I'm going to just shout out to Graham Stringer, who is, I think, the most respectable Labour MP. Although, actually, I also have to shout out now Jonathan Hinder, who has been absolutely consistent on fight. And he's another backbench Labour MP, but he has been absolutely consistent on fighting puberty blockers being given to kids. So he's another. I do like to do. I
Yeah.
ferret around and I try and find people from opposing political parties when I go, actually, I like you. Actually, I trust you, and I think we should elevate the honest ones.
One of the greats is Kate Hoey,
Oh,
who has gone against her party line more times than she's gone with it, as far as I can see. But one of her very big fights was for the countryside. And I know that today the government has launched its consultation on banning trail hunting. And that is just another nail in the coffin. The Labour Party hates rural communities because they are strong, independent minded. They don't bow down to the latest fashion in Westminster or the latest whim of some prime minister. And that independent streak, which when I first moved to Lincolnshire, I have to say was the most wonderful and noticeable thing about it, that Westminster feels so remote. They get on and they do, and they don't take any notice where they don't have to. And therefore, Labour's terrified of them. They
yeah.
don't follow their rules. And so they try and crush them. And they've tried to crush them with the farm tax. They've tried to crush them with the animal rights bill, which of course they're also undoing by signing up to the EU so that we can have animal testing again on animals. Well, that was a sovereign decision that the Brits, who quite like animals, decided to get rid of. But Labour is going to undo because it prefers the EU to the British people.
It's even worse,
It's
Annunciata.
tried to crush the countryside by putting solar panels everywhere. And,
Well, that's true. But on the
and
EU
now
reset,
trail
I
hunting,
have to
one
flag
of
up to
the
everybody.
great traditions.
I have to flag up the worst thing about it is that we all, you and I, actually, I'm just going to shock the audience. I am actually quite old. I know I don't look it, but I am. We lived through BSE, and that was terrifying. This is to younger people who might be
Yes.
watching this, who obviously need to get a life. BSE was a crisis of a medical illness in cattle caused by the feed that we were feeding. We were feeding the cattle bad things. Literally, other dead cows were being fed to cows. What a
Yep.
genius idea that was!
Yep.
It caused a chronic illness in cows, which then we discovered could, in some circumstances, jump to humans and kill us. And at that point, we didn't have a cure for it. So this is
Yep.
a major sort of threatening scandal at the time, and called
And
BSE. And we then put in protections, and the whole of the
bovine
EU did. Sorry,
bovine spongiform encephalopathy, I
right?
believe.
Not to show off there.
Not sure. But we had, wasn't it Gummer, Johnny
Yeah.
Gummer, famously ate a burger to show that British beef was safe to eat. It massively backfired.
Well, it must have been. I mean,
America banned imports of British beef. The EU cut us off completely. Our beef farms suffered immense damage. Um, and it was all caused because of the food chain and eating other dead cows. And yet Europe's just legalized it.
Yeah, a couple of years after we left, they legalized, they got rid of all the protections. So if we're going to copy them, we have to get rid of all our protections. And it's going to happen again. This is a bit like we're now living through the 1970s, which everybody who has any sense or understanding of history knew that these economic policies were stupid economic policies. You can't just constantly print money, and you can't just constantly raise taxes. You will get less money back. The Laffer curve is real, people. Yeah, it feels
Yeah.
like this government, it just wants to defy reality. It wants to defy the normal rules of being. They're just lunatics. But that's the EU reset, which is a huge betrayal. And I hope people get very upset about it. Again, it's going to make food more expensive. If we
Yep.
had any sense, we'd let in. I mean, I don't want to undercut British farmers, but we'd let in soft fruits that we can't grow here seasonally
Of course.
from Africa, because the
Which, which
Africans.
is Which
Sorry.
is what we've done by signing the various trade deals, a number under Kemi Badenoch when she was in government. And all of our new trade deals are put at risk. They probably will have to end because of this EU agreement, that
Yeah.
they go against the idea that we're a sovereign nation and non-sovereign nations can't join other trade groups. But those trade groups don't tell us what we can and can't do. I think it's 90, I forget the exact figure, but 95 roughly % of British businesses do not trade with the EU. And yet, under this agreement, every single last one of them will be bound by EU rules. Some of them much stricter than ours, some of them much more lax than ours, but none of them decided by us.
But you're forgetting the great success of the EU, Annunciata. No, you don't lose the top to soft drinks bottles now, do you? I mean, look at that. Let's all sing to van der Leyen. Yeah, let's all stand and praise. Let's give a 4-hour standing ovation to van der Leyen.
Van der Leyen, who when I was an MEP, I got to vote for. And it's the only ballot paper I have ever voted on which there was one name.
Yeah.
They pretend they have European parliamentarians as a sort of chiffon cover of democracy that is completely and utterly meaningless. But she's done a lot of damage, and their environmental controls are making them highly uncompetitive. But I think if you look at the AI area in particular, they're really struggling because they've got these very, very draconian internet rules. And I'm afraid our government wants to take us down that route. and will mean that our country is stuck in the dark ages with the EU as well. If you look at the number of startups in Europe, it has dwindled to virtually nothing. And the minute they hit any critical mass, they move to America anyway because they can't function
Well,
at any scale.
I like teasing. I like winding you up about Brexit, and I have no public position on it because I was literally holding a baby, and I sort of am quite ambivalent about it because, as far as I'm concerned, there was a vote and that's it. But I'll do the balance thing of defending the EU. Mario Draghi has admitted and has done a very lengthy report. If people want to go away, they can Google Mario Draghi and his report about all the failings of the EU. If they actually listened to Mario Draghi, they would fix the EU. I think they're not going to, but if they did listen to him, so the EU sort of does know its own problems. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, again, is beating this 24-hour news cycle. Four
Yep.
ambulances were attacked and burned down in North London because they were provided voluntarily by Jews. And I just don't want this to fall off the news cycle. I don't want this to get forgotten.
I think both of us tweeted about this, and I didn't look at your responses, but I did look at some of mine, and I'm very disturbed about the level of anti-Semitism across the board in
It's
this
vile.
country.
It's absolutely vile. But
It's
this is why
absolutely vile.
all decent British people, we don't get to, and I don't want to tell people what to do because I actually think that's a mistake. I think British people do this naturally, but it's really not on. It's not cricket for the way that they're talking to the Jewish people who've been here since 1656, and you can't pin anything on them. What have they done? What atrocities have they committed? Where are their terrorism attacks? Nowhere. And they were providing 4 ambulances, which helped. One of the most vile rumors was that they only helped Jews. That's not true. They
Not
helped
true.
everybody in that area. You know, and there are 200 voluntary ambulance services in the country. Probably the biggest is St. John's Ambulance, which is obviously a Christian ambulance service, which doesn't just help Christians; it helps everybody.
No.
And it's on exactly the same basis. That was what they do.
They're a charity that helps save people's lives. It's no different to the air ambulance. They're exactly the same setup. They save people who need saving. And yes, they are manned by Jewish nurses and doctors and paramedics. But that's only because there are some circumstances where they can help Jewish people where other practices might not be able to. But they're absolutely trained and capable of helping everyone, and they do help everyone. And it just symbolically, firebombing ambulances is never justified.
What are
it
you?
just can't be.
Well, there's a lovely quote from Churchill, and when he did the Dunkirk speech, he's got this line saying, "And the hospital ships, being so plainly marked, were a special target for Nazi bombs." So the people who target ambulances and hospital ships are Nazis. That's who does this. Really sinister, evil people. When we fight wars, when Israel fights wars or America fights wars or almost all of our allies, if you see an H, you avoid it. You know, that's what you do. Now, what the bad people did in Gaza was therefore go, we'll put rockets in the hospital then. Which is itself, that is the war crime. But turning a hospital into a violent outpost, a military outpost, that is the crime. That is against the international law. Not then having to respond to that situation, which is what Israel had to do. And I think we're seeing this in Iran as well. I think the Iranians are making civilian structures, which they are by international law supposed to leave as civilian structures. They're turning them into military outposts in order to have human shields. That's what the crime is, to use another human as a shield. If you and I were having dinner and a madman came in with a knife and I grabbed you because you're a wee slip of a thing and I held you in front of me to get you stabbed and not me, I'd be a monster. That's what that's the only word. Yes, just for clarification, I would not do this.
Good.
But I had a terrible
really looking
typo.
forward to dinner with you, Stephen.
Did you see? I had a terrible typo. I don't know how, but your name just came out as Opinionata, and I don't know how that happened. I mean, that's the type of accidental typo that could happen to literally anyone who knows you. But
Ah, thank you, Stephen. Yes, no, I do have the odd opinion, but unlike most politicians, I stick to them. That I think there is an underlying problem with a lot of our politicians at the moment, that they go into politics for power, or they go into politics for position, or they go into politics for the salary, but they don't go in it because it's based on principles. And without principles, you flip flop. And this is exactly the playbook that Labour is demonstrating, that you flip because you don't have any idea what the right or wrong thing is to do. You're looking at what's the popular thing to do, or what's the last person who I had a conversation with told me to do, or what does an expert think I should do. And you make very bad policy, and you have to change it a lot because opinions change, principles don't.
well, I think we need to have I've been thinking about this a lot. I think there's a special category of policy which really calls out that practice because I don't know, I haven't got a word for it yet. So just carry on just stay with me for a second. These are policies which initially, when you say them to people, will be hugely popular. And then when you explain the detail to the people, they suddenly become extremely unpopular. They flip. They're like flip policies. And I think assisted dying is one of them. If you
It is.
just say people shouldn't be forced to die in pain, we should have a law against that to stop that. 90% of people will go, yes. And then if you go, here's the law and here's the detail and this is the complete lack of protections, 90% of people go, bloody hell. You know,
Yeah.
there needs to be a special category because you're quite right. These politicians who only want to be popular, they get themselves into terrible blinds because they're like, the public just changed its mind en masse. Yes, sometimes the public just changes its mind en masse because they realize. There was one recently, and Starmer got the blame for it, and rarely I'm going to defend him because I don't think it was his fault, but he was talking about it. Oh, it's digital ID. Digital ID is another
Oh,
one of these absolute flip policies. You tell
yeah.
people the most superficial thing about it, and they go, "Oh, that sounds good, protecting kids." Then you tell them the detail, and they go, bloody hell. And it's a
Yeah.
flip policy. And that happened. Yet somehow Starmer got the blame, and I think it's because these very weak politicians they don't understand the electorate, so they're just like they must have changed their mind because Starmer did something. It's like actually on this occasion, it's not Starmer. It's because it was a bad policy all along. But the
Yeah.
British will say to bad policies, "Oh, that's superficially attractive," and then read the detail and go, "Oh, okay, no,
And,
okay, no."
and it is the same with abortion up until birth. The public did exactly the same thing. Should we criminalize women who inadvertently take drugs very late in pregnancy and kill their fetus? Most people say no, those aren't women who should probably end up in prison and with criminal convictions. Ask them if a 38-week-old baby, unborn baby, should be killed, and 99% say no.
Yeah,
And our politicians don't have a grasp on that. But actually, the British people are quite reasonable and are quite moral in their
yeah.
general approach. And I think it's one of the great strengths of our country. And when there's a lot of discussion, and it's somewhere that actually Reform and the Tories disagree about, is Britain broken? Now, I think our political system is broken. I think our constitution is at breaking point, but can be fixed. But I think the reason we're fundamentally not broken is because we still have British people, and British people will save the country.
I
And
think
it
that is
won't be this generation
I
of
think it's a
politicians.
noble defense of your leader who made a clearly but obvious political mistake by saying Britain's not broken because it is. And well, Reform have
I
got that
think our
right.
systems are. I think our
It's
systems are
broken.
broken.
Fix it.
Our culture is still not broken, and yes, in some of our cities it might be. But tonight I mentioned I went to a choir. It was the local area schools choirs performance, and the opening song was the national anthem.
Oh,
This was primary school children in rural Lincolnshire. We still are a nation of tradition and of principles and morals. And our politicians can try and undermine that all they like. And we've seen them trying to do it with the puberty blockers. But when you actually ask real people, they do know right from wrong. And there is, when I'm a Tory, as you know, but when in
I think it's come
1997
up.
People voted en masse for Tony Blair and against
I didn't. I was
John
too
Major.
young. I'm a mere slip of a thing in Annunciata. Far too young to be voting in
It was
97.
my first election. I was old enough by 6 weeks. Um, but they were making the right decision. John Major had no grip on running the country. He had managed to turn the economy around, but everything else was falling to pieces. When the British people decided to vote Brexit, despite all the politicians lobbying them and putting the fear of God into them, that Brexit would destroy the country and we'd lose, I can't remember now how many million jobs, and every single last banker would leave the city of London and go to Frankfurt. And none of it happened, but the British people knew what was at stake on the bigger picture, the sovereignty, the control of our own laws. And I think the British people generally do make the right decisions. The Tories were an absolute mess under Rishi Sunak. He was doing the Starmer thing of what's popular. And what's popular doesn't make for good ruling, good law. And it was all going very wrong. Again,
Well, all right
like
then.
John Major,
Time
he
for
got
a
the
scrap then.
economy back on track. Yeah,
Time for a scrap. What the local elections are coming.
they are.
What's your view of what's going to happen in the local elections? Let's finish on that.
Um,
Are you up for? Is Lincolnshire having an election? We're not in
no,
Bucks. We had
no,
ours
we're
last
not. Yeah, we had them last year. We've got them next year, but none this one. Last year, Lincolnshire went completely to reform at county level, and we, for the first time, had a mayor who is also reform. And my local MP is Richard Tice,
year. Hang
who is
on,
also reform.
isn't your mayor Andrea?
Andrea Jenkins, yeah. So we've got 3 layers of reform where I live, but no elections. I think the Tories will lose more seats overall. I think Labour will lose a lot of seats.
They don't. They shouldn't even exist.
I feel very sorry for probably well-meaning Labour council candidates up and down the country, but their government has completely betrayed them, just as it's betrayed the British people. I think Reform will do very well. And the polls in Scotland and in Wales show them having pretty strong results there.
I think Scotland's more
Scotland
troubling.
less so.
Yeah, Scotland's really.
Scotland,
It's become a very odd nut to crack. It is very different. To just feel. I don't really know. It's like the Scottish Tories don't feel like Tories. The Scottish Labour don't feel like Labour. None of it makes any sense. I find Scotland impenetrably tricky. I don't mind confessing. Whereas Wales, I think I've got a sense of it. I've got a grip of what's going on. It's going to be Plaid and versus Reform. But
it is. But I think the Greens will go in with Plaid, and it will be therefore a Plaid win at the end of the day, is my current take on it from the polls. But with Reform going from virtually nothing to the second largest party, which is no mean feat at all. And I applaud the Welsh for going in that direction. I stood in 2005 in Aberavon,
right,
which
where's that?
is South Wales. The most famous, well, the big town in it is Port Talbot, which
Talbot.
has the steelworks. Yeah.
Had and needs them
Had.
again. Useless
But
labour, useless net zero.
That was the problem. The people I canvassed, honestly, I mean, I'm English, but they were the nicest
Did they
people I have
notice
ever
it?
canvassed anywhere. And they would say to me with a warm smile, My grandfather would turn in his grave if I considered voting Conservative. I wouldn't vote, I'd vote Labour if it was a donkey with a red rosette. Literally, these were things said to me. But good luck to you. And they were just lovely to nice people to canvass and to talk to and get to know. But they had been betrayed by a Labour local council, Labour in the Senedd, Labour at a government level, because this is 2005. Labour was still the governing part, well, were the governing party back then. And it just felt like they were so taken for granted that everything was allowed to fall to pieces, that they just didn't matter to
I
Labour
hate
in
that. That is
Westminster
so wrong.
or at any level.
That is
And
just
so
wrong.
I'm really pleased that Wales seems to be switching pretty much whole scale towards reform. It needs a change. It needs to have politicians who actually care about the local people. And I hope reform do that. They were never likely to turn to the Tories. I've got no skin in that game. I think it had to be something different. And if reform can help rescue Wales, that's all for the good.
Yes.
But the local councils in England, yeah, Labour will do very badly. The big question is, will Keir Starmer still be Prime Minister on the 8th, 9th, 10th of May as the results come in?
Well,
I don't know what he can survive.
let's end this episode on a fierce agreement, because I suspect we will agree on this. Is that I think the Labour Party are way too slow to get rid of an incompetent leader who is obviously hurting their party. And if I was in the Labour Party, I would be screaming to get rid of Keir Starmer. I think you can throw the criticism at the right that we're far too quick to knife leaders.
Yeah.
But the Labour Party is the opposite problem. It is obvious he should go. He should be gone by now. They'd have a better shot in May. And they shouldn't blame the new leader for May. They have to pin that on Starmer. But he doesn't have to physically be leader to get the blame. The idea of keeping him till the 8th of May is just, I just think it's bonkers.
Well, the most stupid thing I think they did was not getting rid of him immediately after the Gorton and Denton by-election. Because if they had, under the Labour rules for getting the new leader, they wouldn't have got their feet under the table of number 10 before the local elections. And therefore the blame would still have been on Keir Starmer, and they'd have come out of the local elections with a clean sheet. They missed that opportunity. The problem is, they've got no one with any credibility to replace him. As
Angela.
much as you like Angela Rayner, I'm sure it's all just about her hair. But she doesn't actually have any credibility. She looks great fun to go to the pub with, but I can't see her doing a good job of being Prime Minister. None of the other candidates are up to the scratch. And it's not going to fundamentally change the problem they've got, which is a totally directionless, rudderless, and divided party that doesn't know where it's going or even what it wants to do. That you've got the really hard left, you've got the sort of Blairites, and they're just not agreeing. So that the backbenchers are winning, but not agreeing with the rest of them. And a new leader isn't going to fundamentally change that. I think that you're right, they've got to try it. I think you're right that Keir Starmer is only doing more harm the longer he's there, but it's not going to change it fundamentally.
Well, on that sad note for the Labour Party, which neither of us belongs to or naturally, actually wants anything good to happen to, but that is the end of episode 2 of Too Right.
Damn right.
And we will be back next week. As many of you know, this week's schedule was mildly interrupted, but we will get back to publishing regularly on a Thursday, I think. But we'll work this week out, and then we'll get back to you next week. Thank you very much, everybody who watches. We are delighted to have viewers.
Yes, amazed to have viewers.
Yes,
I hope you
amazed.
enjoy it.